Stop causing drama, Evelyn. You are embarrassing yourself and making things impossible for all of us. Marcus is family now, and Richard owns half the local council. Just apologize, bow your head, and accept that you do not belong in our world anymore. Her words hung in the muggy afternoon heat like fresh grease on glass. That was the exact second my internal compass clicked into place. The last thread of sisterly loyalty snapped, clean and dry. I looked at her polished designer sandals, her perfect highlights, and her completely empty eyes. She had traded her history for an entry-level seat at a third-rate country club, and she was willing to let these men trample her own blood just to keep her reservation. I gave her a small, tight nod. Intelligence received. Target profile updated. I closed the front door without another word, turning the lock with a slow, deliberate click. I did not raise my voice, I did not offer a quick retort, and I did not slam the heavy wood. I walked down the hall to the basement stairs, descended into the dark, cool air, and knelt beside the fireproof safe. I punched in the 8-digit security code, pulled open the heavy steel door, and retrieved my official military credentials, my active security clearance documentation, and a small encrypted flash drive stamped with red operational markings. Then I made a single 3-minute phone call to a direct line at the Pentagon. The caller on the other end was a 3-star general who had watched me extract his favorite reconnaissance team from a burning compound outside Kandahar 7 years ago. He answered on the second ring, skipping the formal greetings entirely. "Major, I assume you are not calling from Virginia to ask about the weather," his deep voice growled through the speaker. I gave him a concise 4-sentence summary of the active harassment, the local safety threats, and the financial coercion being flexed by Richard Lewis, including the names of his primary shipping subcontractors. The general listened in complete silence. "Send the file," he said simply. 2 days later, Richard organized a massive outdoor family showcase in his pristine backyard, inviting half the neighborhood to demonstrate his dominant standing. They had hired a caterer, set up high-end outdoor heaters, and set up a small elevated ring on the manicured grass. Marcus was struts around in full training gear, flexing his arms for the gathered guests while Sarah handed out expensive champagne glasses from a silver tray. They thought they were hosting a victory celebration. They thought they had successfully squeezed a broke single mother into absolute submission. I stepped through the gap in the low wooden fence carrying a single leather folder, my daughter Lily walking quietly 5 paces behind me. Marcus saw us first and immediately burst into a loud, booming laugh, tossing a heavy pair of leather combat gloves directly at my boots. "Put the gloves on, almighty sister-in-law, or should I snap your arm and send you to the hospital right in front of that little brat daughter of yours?" Marcus sneered, stepping down into the grass with his heavy shoulders rolled forward. Behind him, Richard let out a loud, guttural laugh that rattled through the humid air. "Teach this pathetic soldier a lesson. Son, show her that in this place my money is the law." I stood perfectly still on the manicured grass, looking at the relatives who were eagerly trying to crush my daughter and me. Overseas strangers in uniform took actual bullets for me. Here, my own family was trying to drive the deepest knives into my back. They had absolutely no idea that cornering a senior special operations officer was not a simple flex of local power. It was an absolute death sentence for their entire arrogant empire. I did not reach down to pick up the gloves. I did not take a fighting stance. I simply opened the leather folder in my hands and looked Richard straight in the eye. "Richard, as of 6 o'clock this morning, the Department of Defense suspended all 3 of your primary logistics contracts pending a federal audit for severe safety violations and suspected fraud," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent lawn. "Furthermore, your primary commercial transport fleet is currently being impounded by state troopers at the Maryland border for illegal cargo weight evasions." The entire crowd went dead silent. The caterers froze mid-pour, and the neighbors slowly lowered their champagne glasses, staring at the middle-aged man whose face was rapidly draining of all its dark color. Richard stumbled forward 2 short steps, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. "What did you say?" he choked out, his hands trembling violently as he fumbled for his gold-cased mobile phone. He pulled up his business dashboard, scrolled wildly for 5 seconds, and then let out a strange, choked gasp. His primary operations line began ringing incessantly, displaying alert notifications from his head corporate accountant and his chief legal officer simultaneously. His multimillion-dollar transport enterprise was collapsing in real time right in front of his family. Marcus looked between his ruined father and me, his heavy chest heaving with uncontrolled, confused rage. "You ruined our family business with your lies," he roared, lunging directly across the grass toward me with his right fist pulled all the way back. He was moving fast, but to someone who had spent 10 years reacting to close-range explosive threats, he looked like he was moving underwater. I did not flinch, I did not step back, and I did not panic. I simply stepped inside his wide swing, locked his extended elbow against my chest, and applied 3 pounds of targeted pressure to his collarbone. The giant man went down hard on his knees with a loud, wet thud, his heavy body shaking as he gasped for air on the trimmed lawn. I held his wrist pinned securely behind his back with one hand, leaning down until my mouth was 2 inches from his ear. If you ever walk past my fence, look at my daughter, or break another piece of my property, I will ensure the federal investigators take a very close personal interest in your private financial accounts, I whispered softly. He nodded frantically against the damp dirt, tears of pure terror cutting clean tracks through the dust on his face. I released his arm and stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. Sarah was standing near the patio table, her expensive glass dropped on the stone paving, her hands covering her mouth in total horror. She looked at her broken husband groveling on the grass, then at her hyperventilating father-in-law, and finally at me. For the first time in her life, she saw her older sister clearly. She took a timid step forward, opening her mouth to offer an apology or plead for family leniency, but I simply held up a quiet hand, cutting off her words before they could start. There is nothing left to discuss, Sarah, I said, keeping my tone entirely calm and even. You made your choice when you thought I was weak, and now you have to live with the consequences of standing beside men who build their pride on terrorizing women and children. I turned my back on the entire ruined party, took my daughter by her small hand, and walked slowly back across the border of our green property line. Behind us, the silent neighbors began quietly slipping away toward their cars, leaving the shattered family standing alone on their expensive lawn. That evening, the neighborhood returned to its natural, deep quiet. The heavy punching bag was gone from the property line, the aggressive sports cars sat completely silent in the driveway, and the loudspeaker systems were packed away into cardboard boxes. I sat on my front porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching Lily peacefully ride her purple bicycle up and down the safe asphalt street. She looked back at me with a wide, effortless smile, her laughter echoing softly through the warm Virginia air. Living through years of real conflict teaches you a fundamental truth about human nature. True strength is never about how loud you can shout, how much money you can display, or how heavily you can intimidate the people standing around you. True power is about the quiet discipline to endure, the patient courage to protect the people who rely on you, and the wisdom to know exactly when to bring the hammer down. I took a slow sip of my coffee, leaned back against the steady wooden railing, and finally let out a long, peaceful breath.